I stood in the control room, watching my life's work process. $320,000 worth of transactions every hour. 5 years of proving myself at my father's company, building this revolutionary pipeline system from nothing. But Bradley Whitman, the new heir apparent, just walked into my office with security guards and a termination letter. "My dad's company isn't your vacation spot, sweetheart," he sneered. "Pack up." I looked at the emergency shutdown switch and smiled coldly. "The pipeline shuts down in 10 minutes. Good luck." 20 years ago, my father, Robert Morrison, started Morrison Tech Solutions in our two-car garage in Palo Alto. I grew up watching him code late into the night, building websites for local businesses, dreaming of something bigger. When I graduated summa cum laude from Stanford with a degree in computer engineering, everyone expected me to join Google or Facebook. Instead, I chose to start at the bottom of Dad's company. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" Dad asked on my first day. "Customer service isn't exactly what we spent $150,000 on your education for." "I want to earn my place," I told him, adjusting my headset in the cramped customer support cubicle. "No shortcuts." For 2 years, I handled angry clients, learned every pain point in our systems, and documented every inefficiency. I spent nights studying our code base, understanding how each component worked. When a position opened in quality assurance, I applied like any external candidate. Dad recused himself from the hiring process. I got the job on merit. That year in QA taught me how systems could fail in spectacular ways. I traced bugs back to their roots, learned to think like an attacker, trying to break our security. When our lead developer quit unexpectedly, leaving behind a mess of poorly documented code, I volunteered to clean it up. "This entire authentication module is held together with digital duct tape," I told Dad during our weekly one-on-one. "One wrong input could crash everything." "Fix it," he said simply. "You've earned the chance." That's when I designed the pipeline system that would transform our company. We had 12 major banks across the West Coast struggling with real-time transaction processing. Their legacy systems couldn't handle the volume, couldn't guarantee security, couldn't provide the speed modern commerce demanded. I spent 6 months architecting a solution that could process thousands of transactions simultaneously while maintaining bank-level security. I wrote every line of critical code myself, implementing multiple redundancy layers and automatic fail-safes. When I presented it to the board, they were skeptical. "You're asking us to bet our entire future on a system built by someone who was answering phones 2 years ago," said Margaret Williams, our chief financial officer. "I'm asking you to bet on a system that will generate $20 million in revenue this year," I replied, pulling up my projections. "And $60 million next year." I was conservative. By year 3, we were processing over $2 billion in transactions annually. Our uptime record hit 99.7%. The 12 banks that initially signed on became our biggest advocates, referring other financial institutions. We became the go-to solution for real-time payment processing on the West Coast. But I built it smart. I was the only one with administrative access to the core systems. I trained 2 junior engineers, Alex Chen and Maria Rodriguez, on basic maintenance procedures. But the deep architecture, the security protocols, the emergency procedures, those stayed with me. Dad understood. In this business, knowledge was power, and power protected the company. 6 months ago, everything changed. Dad clutched his chest during a board meeting, his face going pale. The paramedics said it was a minor heart attack, but it scared him. At 62, he started thinking about succession planning. "I can't run this forever, Athena," he told me from his hospital bed. "And you're brilliant with technology, but business operations, investor relations, strategic planning, that's not your strength." Enter Bradley Whitman. His father, Jonathan Whitman, was our largest investor, owning 30% of Morrison Tech. Bradley had an MBA from Harvard Business School, 3 years of experience at Goldman Sachs, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to prove yourself. Think of it as an apprenticeship, Dad explained when he announced Bradley as our new chief operating officer. He'll learn the business, you'll learn management. Eventually, you two will run this company together. I should have seen the red flags immediately. On Bradley's first day, he walked through our offices like he was surveying property he already owned. He scheduled strategic alignment meetings with every department head except me. When I finally got on his calendar 2 weeks later, he kept me waiting 30 minutes. Athena, great to finally connect, he said, not looking up from his laptop. I've been reviewing your pipeline system. Impressive work for what it is. What it is, I asked. Well, it's obviously a legacy solution, built with outdated security protocols, limited scalability, no cloud integration. My consultants at McKinsey think we could improve efficiency by 40% with a modern architecture. That's when I knew we had a problem. Bradley was talking about rebuilding the system that generated 80% of our revenue, the system that 12 major banks trusted with billions of dollars in transactions, the system that had never failed in 3 years of operation. But the real twist came during our second meeting. Bradley slid a folder across the conference table. I'm bringing in some additional talent to help modernize our technical infrastructure. Tyler Park from my Harvard class will join us as head of strategic development, and Jessica Martinez, who led digital transformation at 3 Fortune 500 companies, will be our new director of operations. I opened the folder and felt my stomach drop. These weren't additions to the team. They were replacements. Tyler's job description included oversight of legacy system architecture and transition planning. Jessica's role involved optimization of redundant technical positions. Bradley smiled as I read. Change is hard, Athena, but it's necessary for growth. I hope you'll be a team player during this transition. Tyler Park arrived first, wheeling a carbon fiber suitcase through our lobby like he was checking into a 5-star hotel. He wore expensive suits that probably cost more than most of our employees made in a month, and he had this habit of using business buzzwords in place of actual communication. Athena, excited to collaborate on disrupting our legacy paradigms, he said during our introduction. I'm thinking we should schedule some deep dives to identify optimization opportunities in your current tech stack. Jessica Martinez followed a week later, bringing an energy that reminded me of a corporate tornado. She immediately started scheduling efficiency audits, with every employee carrying an iPad and asking questions like, how would you quantify the value add of your current role responsibilities? Within 2 weeks, they'd called meetings with every department except mine. I found out about these sessions secondhand when confused employees would stop by my office asking what right-sizing our human capital allocation meant for their jobs. They're basically asking who we could fire, explained Danny Walsh from accounting. Jessica kept asking if our processes could be automated or outsourced. The consultants arrived next. Bradley hired a team from McKinsey, 5 sharp-dressed analysts who spent their days interviewing employees and their nights in expensive hotels, billing us $3,000 per day per consultant. They treated our office like an archaeological dig, analyzing every procedure as if it were a relic from a less enlightened age. Your current transaction processing methodology lacks the agility of modern cloud-based solutions, announced the lead consultant, a woman named Patricia Vance, during an all-hands meeting. We recommend transitioning to a distributed microservices architecture that would enhance scalability while reducing operational overhead. I raised my hand. What about security? Moving to a cloud-based system would expose us to additional attack vectors. Our current clients specifically chose us because we maintain private, secure infrastructure. Patricia smiled condescendingly. Security through obscurity is an outdated approach. Modern cloud providers offer enterprise-grade protection that exceeds anything a small company could implement internally. Small company? I stood up. We process over $2 billion in transactions annually. Our security record is perfect. Why would we introduce risk to fix something that isn't broken? Bradley jumped in before Patricia could respond. Athena raises good points, but we need to think strategically. Our current system might work for today's volume, but what about when we're processing 10 billion, 20 billion? We need infrastructure that scales. The room fell silent. Everyone knew our current system could handle that volume. I designed it to scale horizontally, adding processing nodes as needed. But Bradley was painting a picture of inevitable obsolescence, making my work sound like a temporary solution, rather than the foundation of our company's success. After the meeting, I pulled Bradley aside. Can we talk privately about these infrastructure changes? Of course, he said, but he brought Tyler and Jessica to the conference room. We're all on the same team here. I'm concerned about the timeline and risk profile of moving to a cloud-based system, I began. Implementation would take at least 18 months, cost upward of $8 million, and require rebuilding relationships with all our banking clients. Their compliance departments would need to recertify our security protocols. Tyler jumped in. But think about the competitive advantages. Cloud infrastructure offers automatic scaling, built-in redundancy, and integration with modern analytics platforms. We already have automatic scaling and redundancy, I pointed out, and our analytics are customized for financial transaction processing. Off-the-shelf solutions can't match what we've built. Jessica pulled up a presentation on her tablet. Our analysis suggests significant cost savings through workforce optimization. A cloud-based system would require fewer specialized technical roles, allowing us to reallocate human resources to revenue-generating activities. There it was. They weren't just planning to replace my system. They were planning to replace me. Bradley sensed my realization. Athena, I know change feels threatening, but think about your career growth. Once we've modernized our infrastructure, you could transition into a strategic role, maybe leading our innovation initiatives or client relations. Innovation initiatives, client relations, anything except the technical work I'd spent 5 years mastering. I nodded politely and excused myself, but my mind was racing. That evening, I stayed late reviewing our server logs. Something had been bothering me about Tyler's questions during our previous meetings. He'd asked very specific questions about our database architecture, our security protocols, our disaster recovery procedures. Questions that went far beyond what someone planning general improvements would need to know. I pulled up our network activity logs and found what I was looking for. Tyler had been attempting to access restricted areas of our system using his standard employee credentials. The attempts were subtle, professionally done, but they triggered our automated security alerts. Someone with his background would know these attempts were being logged. Unless he wanted them to be logged. Unless he was testing our security monitoring to understand what access he'd need to avoid detection. I spent the next 3 hours tracing Tyler's digital footprint through our systems. Most of his activity was legitimate, but buried in the routine file access were subtle probes of our most sensitive infrastructure. He was mapping our network topology, identifying critical dependencies, cataloging administrative accounts. The twist that made my blood run cold came when I checked our email server logs. Tyler had been forwarding detailed technical specifications to an external email address. The address belonged to Dataflow Corporation, our biggest competitor in the financial processing space. Bradley wasn't just planning to modernize our systems. He was planning to steal them. I spent the weekend digging deeper into what I'd discovered. Working from home using my personal laptop to access our systems, through my administrative credentials, I traced every digital breadcrumb Tyler and Jessica had left behind. The picture that emerged was devastating. They weren't just gathering information for internal improvements. They were conducting corporate espionage on a massive scale. Tyler had systematically documented our entire technical infrastructure, our client contracts, our proprietary algorithms. Jessica had compiled detailed employee evaluations, identifying who could be retained versus who represented redundant overhead. But the real shock came when I discovered the email thread between Bradley and someone at Dataflow Corporation. The conversation went back 6 months, starting just 2 weeks after Dad's heart attack. Jonathan speaks highly of your strategic vision for Morrison Tech, wrote David Sterling, Dataflow's chief technology officer. We'd be interested in exploring partnership opportunities that could benefit both organizations. Bradley's response was chilling. Morrison has valuable assets, particularly their real-time processing pipeline. However, the current leadership structure creates obstacles to optimization. I'm implementing changes that should resolve these barriers within 6 months. The conversation continued over weeks, growing more explicit. Bradley discussed transitioning legacy technical personnel and extracting maximum value from existing intellectual property. He shared our client lists, our financial projections, our proprietary documentation. Most damaging was an email from 3 weeks ago. The architect who built their core systems is emotionally attached to outdated approaches, Bradley wrote. Once we've documented her methodologies and transitioned her responsibilities, she'll become expendable. Dataflow's offer for the extracted pipeline technology remains attractive. Dataflow had offered Bradley a 7-figure consulting contract in exchange for Morrison Tech's proprietary systems and client relationships. He wasn't trying to improve our company. He was systematically dismantling it for personal profit. I printed everything. Every email, every document transfer, every unauthorized access attempt. Then I called Dad's cell phone. "Athena, it's Sunday evening," he said, sounding tired. "Can this wait until tomorrow?" "Dad, I need to show you something. Bradley is selling our company to Dataflow." Silence on the other end. Then, "That's a serious accusation. What evidence do you have?" Email records, file transfer logs documented contract negotiations. He's been planning this since he arrived. "Can you prove Dataflow is paying him?" I hesitated. The consulting contract was referenced in emails, but I hadn't found direct financial records. "I have the email communications, but proving money changed hands would require access to his personal banking information." Another pause. "Athena, I understand you're frustrated with the changes Bradley is implementing. But corporate espionage is a felony. Are you absolutely certain you're interpreting this correctly?" My heart sank. Dad was asking me to prove a negative to provide evidence I couldn't possibly obtain without breaking the law myself. Worse, he was suggesting I might be misunderstanding what I'd found. "Dad, they're stealing our technology. Tyler has forwarded our complete system architecture to Dataflow. Jessica has prepared termination lists for 40% of our employees. Bradley has promised to deliver our client contracts and proprietary algorithms." "I'll review what you found," Dad said finally. "But Athena, I need you to be careful about making accusations you can't substantiate. Bradley's father is our largest investor. If we're wrong about this, it could destroy our relationship with the Whitman family." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the stack of printed evidence. Dad wasn't dismissing what I'd found, but he wasn't taking action either. His caution was understandable from a business perspective, but devastating from a personal one. For 5 years, he'd been my strongest supporter. Now, when I needed his trust most, he was asking me to prove the impossible. Monday morning brought the next twist. I arrived early, hoping to find Dad in his office before the rest of the executive team arrived. Instead, I found Tyler and Jessica in the conference room, with several people I didn't recognize, all wearing expensive suits and carrying matching portfolios. Bradley spotted me through the glass door and waved me over. "Athena, perfect timing. I'd like you to meet the technical integration team from Dataflow Corporation." My stomach dropped. Bradley was introducing our competitors as consultants, bringing them into our office to examine our systems firsthand. "Dataflow has graciously offered to provide expertise on our modernization initiative," Bradley continued. "They've successfully implemented cloud-based transaction processing for companies similar to ours." The lead Dataflow representative, a man named Richard Chen, stepped forward. "We're excited to collaborate with Morrison Tech. Bradley has shared some impressive documentation of your current infrastructure. We'd love to observe your systems in operation." "Observe?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Well, eventually we'll need administrative access to fully assess optimization opportunities," Richard explained. "But we can start with read-only monitoring of your pipeline processes." I looked around the room. Tyler was smiling. Jessica was taking notes. Bradley was nodding enthusiastically, and Dad was nowhere to be seen. "Where's my father?" I asked. "Robert is in meetings with potential strategic partners," Bradley said smoothly. exploring opportunities for Morrison Tech to scale beyond our current capacity. The final piece clicked into place. Bradley wasn't just stealing our technology, he was selling the entire company. While I'd been gathering evidence of corporate espionage, he'd been negotiating Morrison Tech's acquisition by a larger firm. Once the sale completed, our technology would belong to new owners, our employees would be redundant, and Bradley would walk away with both his consulting fees from data flow and whatever commission he'd negotiated for facilitating the sale. I excused myself and walked calmly to my office, closing the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I opened my laptop and logged into the pipeline monitoring system. $297,000 in transactions, processing every hour. 12 major banks trusting us with their most critical operations. 60 employees depending on Morrison Tech for their livelihoods. And I was the only person who could protect them all. I had 48 hours to build my defense before Bradley's next move. Working late into Monday night, I compiled everything I'd discovered into a comprehensive report that even the most skeptical board member couldn't dismiss. The evidence was overwhelming. I documented every unauthorized access attempt, every forwarded document, every suspicious meeting between Bradley and data flow representatives. I traced the timeline from Dad's heart attack through Bradley's hiring to his systematic infiltration of our company. Most importantly, I mapped the financial impact of his proposed changes, showing how his modernization would actually reduce our competitive advantages while increasing operational costs. But I needed more than evidence. I needed leverage. Tuesday morning, I began implementing safeguards. Bradley couldn't see or circumvent. The beauty of being the system architect was that I understood every component, every dependency, every potential failure point. More importantly, I'd built protective measures into the original design that even I had forgotten about, until this crisis forced me to remember them. The pipeline system operated on a separate secure network, isolated from the main corporate infrastructure. Bradley's team could access our email servers, file shares, and standard applications, but the core transaction processing system required specialized credentials that only I possessed. Every attempt to access the pipeline from an unauthorized account triggered automatic alerts sent directly to my personal phone. I spent Tuesday afternoon reviewing these alerts from the past month. Tyler had attempted to access the pipeline system 17 times. Each attempt was professionally executed using legitimate-looking service accounts and carefully timing his access during high-activity periods when the attempts might be overlooked. But our security protocols were smarter than he'd anticipated. The pipeline used a rotating authentication system I designed based on military cryptography standards. Every 24 hours, all administrative accounts required fresh authorization codes, generated by an algorithm that incorporated multiple variables, transaction volume, system load, network status, and a personal identification key that only I knew. Without the daily authorization, the system assumed a security breach was in progress and automatically initiated emergency protocols. Bradley's team didn't know about the daily authorization requirement because it operated invisibly under normal circumstances. As long as I input my code each morning, the system continued operating smoothly. But if I was suddenly removed from my position, unable to provide authorization, or if someone tried to force access without proper credentials, the pipeline would interpret this as a hostile takeover attempt and shut down completely to protect client data. Wednesday morning brought the twist I'd been expecting. Jessica Martinez scheduled an urgent meeting with me for Thursday afternoon, citing strategic personnel restructuring as the agenda. She'd copied Bradley and our HR director, Sarah Peterson, on the invitation. I knew what that meant. Thursday would be my termination day. I spent Wednesday preparing my final moves. First, I created detailed documentation of Bradley's espionage activities, packaged it with financial projections, showing the true cost of his proposed changes, and scheduled the files to be automatically emailed to every board member Friday morning. If I was terminated Thursday, the board would receive evidence of Bradley's betrayal 24 hours later. Next, I contacted our 12 major banking clients directly. Using my technical liaison credentials, I sent each client relationship manager a routine security update explaining that Morrison Tech was implementing enhanced authentication protocols that would require additional confirmation procedures for any changes to our service agreements. The message was professional and routine, but it would prevent Bradley from modifying our contracts without client approval. Finally, I prepared my negotiating position. The pipeline system was my creation, my intellectual property, my responsibility. I'd built it to protect our clients' financial data, and those same protections could be used to defend against corporate raiders who didn't understand what they were trying to steal. Thursday morning, I arrived early and checked the pipeline status one final time. $320,000 in transactions, processing every hour. Zero downtime in 36 months. 12 satisfied clients, whose trust was built on reliability and security. I had not yet input Thursday's daily authorization code. At 10:30, my phone buzzed with a text message from Sarah Peterson. Please come to conference room B for your 1:30 meeting. Bradley has requested that Tom Williams from security attend as well. Tom Williams was a good man who'd worked security for Morrison Tech for 8 years. He'd been hired as a part-time guard and worked his way up to head of security through competence and loyalty. More importantly, he'd been one of the first people I'd trained on basic pipeline safety procedures when Dad insisted that multiple people understand our emergency protocols. I texted Tom directly, "Heads up about this afternoon. You might want to review our emergency shutdown procedures before the meeting." His response came immediately, "Already ahead of you. Something doesn't feel right about this." At noon, I grabbed lunch and sat in my car in the parking lot watching Dataflow representatives walk through our front entrance carrying computer equipment and file boxes. They weren't consulting anymore. They were moving in. I pulled out my phone and opened the pipeline monitoring app. All systems green, transaction volume normal, client connection stable. Estimated time until daily authorization window expired 1 hour and 37 minutes. I walked back into the building, nodded politely to the Dataflow team setting up equipment in our conference room, and headed to my office to wait for the meeting that would change everything. Conference room B felt different when I walked in at exactly 1:30. The usual whiteboard was covered with organizational charts showing Morrison Tech's structure with red lines drawn through various positions. Bradley sat at the head of the table wearing a suit that probably cost more than most of our employees made in a week. Jessica Martinez was to his left, laptop open, fingers poised over the keyboard like a court stenographer. Sarah Peterson from HR looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with a manila folder thick with documents. Tom Williams stood near the door, and when our eyes met, I could see the conflict in his expression. He'd been told to provide security for a personnel meeting, but his instincts were telling him something else was happening. "Athena, thanks for coming," Bradley began, his tone artificially friendly. "Please have a seat." I remained standing. "I'd rather hear what this is about first." Bradley's smile faltered slightly. "Of course. Jessica, would you like to explain the purpose of our meeting?" Jessica cleared her throat and began reading from her laptop screen. After careful analysis of Morrison Tech's operational efficiency and strategic positioning, leadership has identified several opportunities for organizational optimization. Organizational optimization, I repeated. Specifically, we've determined that certain legacy approaches to technical infrastructure management are creating barriers to our modernization initiatives. As a result, we're implementing immediate changes to our technology leadership structure. Sarah Peterson opened her manila folder and slid a document across the table. "Athena, this is your official termination letter effective immediately. The company is prepared to offer a generous separation package in exchange for your cooperation during the transition period." I picked up the letter and scanned it quickly. The language was clinical, referring to performance issues and failure to integrate with evolving team objectives. No mention of my 5 years of perfect system uptime. No acknowledgement of the millions in revenue. My pipeline had generated no recognition of the technical expertise that had made Morrison Tech a leader in financial processing. "What specific performance issues?" I asked, looking directly at Bradley. Well, there's been consistent resistance to modernization initiatives, he replied. Reluctance to collaborate with our strategic consulting partners, failure to provide comprehensive documentation of your systems to enable team-based maintenance approaches. You mean failure to give Dataflow complete access to our proprietary technology? The room went silent. Sarah Peterson's eyes widened. Tom Williams straightened up. Jessica stopped typing. Bradley's artificial friendliness evaporated. I'm not sure what you're implying, but our relationship with Dataflow is a legitimate consulting engagement designed to help Morrison Tech remain competitive. Is it? I pulled out my phone and opened the folder containing Bradley's email correspondence. Because these communications suggest you've been providing Dataflow with our client lists, financial projections, and technical specifications in exchange for a seven-figure consulting contract. Jessica reached for her laptop, probably to delete files, but Tom Williams stepped forward. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the computer. Bradley stood up abruptly. Tom, you're here to provide security support, not to interfere with a legitimate personnel action. Sir, if there are allegations of corporate espionage that falls under my jurisdiction as head of security. There are no allegations, Bradley snapped. There's a disgruntled employee making baseless accusations to avoid accountability for her own performance failures. I held up my phone showing the email thread. David Sterling from Dataflow, October 15th. Your strategic vision for extracting value from Morrison's technical assets aligns with our acquisition timeline. Your response, October 16th. The architect who built their core systems will become expendable once we've documented her methodologies. Sarah Peterson's face went pale. Bradley, is this true? Those emails are being taken out of context, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Strategic partnerships often involve sharing technical information under appropriate confidentiality agreements. Show me the confidentiality agreement, Tom Williams demanded. Bradley hesitated. That's being finalized by our legal team. No, I said, it's not, because Dataflow isn't a consulting partner. They're our biggest competitor, and you've been selling them our technology in preparation for a hostile acquisition. Jessica finally found her voice. Even if that were true, you're still terminated, Athena. Security protocols are management's responsibility, not yours. Actually, I replied, according to the technical services agreement I signed when I designed the pipeline system, security protocols for client financial data are specifically my responsibility. Any attempt to modify or transfer those systems requires my written authorization. Bradley laughed, but it sounded forced. That agreement was with your father's company. As COO, I have authority to override subordinate employee contracts. You have authority to manage personnel. You don't have authority to compromise client security or violate federal financial regulations. I looked around the room. The pipeline system processes transactions for 12 major banks under strict regulatory oversight. Unauthorized access to that system is a federal crime. Tom Williams spoke up. What kind of unauthorized access? I showed him Tyler's access logs on my phone. 17 attempts to breach the core transaction system over the past month. All attempts originated from accounts associated with Dataflow personnel. Bradley was losing control of the situation. This is ridiculous! Athena, you're terminated. I need all your passwords, access codes, and system documentation. Security will escort you from the building immediately. I don't think so, I said calmly. The pipeline system has automatic security protocols that activate when unauthorized personnel attempt to gain administrative access. Those protocols are designed to protect client financial data from exactly this kind of situation. What protocols? Jessica asked, her voice sharp with concern. I pulled up the pipeline monitoring app on my phone. Every day at 2:15 p.m., the system requires fresh authorization from the primary administrator. That's me. If I don't provide today's authorization code, the system assumes a security breach is in progress and automatically shuts down to protect client data. Bradley checked his watch. It's 2:05. Input the code. No. Input the code immediately, or we'll have you arrested for corporate sabotage. Call the police, I said, settling into a chair. I'll explain to them how you've been selling our technology to competitors and attempting to steal our client contracts. I'm sure federal investigators would be interested in your communications with data flow. Sarah Peterson was frantically typing on her phone. Tom Williams had moved to block the conference room door. Jessica was staring at her laptop screen like it might provide answers to problems she hadn't anticipated. Bradley pulled out his own phone. Tyler, I need you in conference room B immediately. Bring your technical documentation. I smiled. Tyler can't help you. Administrative access to the pipeline requires biometric authentication linked to my personal credentials. Even if someone else had the correct codes, which they don't, the system would still reject unauthorized access attempts. This is extortion, Bradley said, his composure completely gone. This is security, I replied. I built these protections specifically to prevent hostile takeovers and corporate espionage. The system is working exactly as designed. My phone showed 8 minutes until authorization deadline. In the hallway outside the conference room, I could hear phones starting to ring as our operations team began receiving automated alerts about the approaching authorization window. Bradley sat down heavily, his face pale with realization. What do you want? I want you to explain to everyone in this room exactly what you've been doing with data flow. I want Tom Williams to secure all of Tyler's and Jessica's computer equipment for investigation. And I want Sarah to call an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. And if I don't agree, I checked my phone. Then in 7 minutes, a $320,000 per hour pipeline shuts down. 12 major banks lose their primary transaction processing service, and Morrison Tech faces massive penalty fees for breach of contract. Your choice. Bradley's face cycled through emotions I'd never seen before. Disbelief, rage, calculation, and finally, desperate panic. He grabbed his phone and speed-dialed someone. Tyler, get in here now. Bring everything you have on the pipeline system architecture. He hung up and glared at me. You're making the biggest mistake of your career, Athena. Do you have any idea what this will cost the company? I know exactly what it will cost, I replied, checking my phone. 6 minutes and 40 seconds until automatic shutdown. Each hour of downtime will cost us $320,000 in processing fees, plus penalty payments to our banking clients. But that's nothing compared to what your deal with Dataflow would have cost us. Tom Williams had positioned himself between our table and the door. Sir, I'm going to need you to remain calm and explain what Miss Morrison is talking about regarding data flow. This is insane, Bradley said, but his voice cracked. I'm the chief operating officer of this company. I don't have to justify my strategic decisions to security personnel. You do when those decisions involve potential criminal activity, Tom replied firmly. Ma'am, he addressed me. Can you prove these allegations? I handed him my phone open to Tyler's access logs. 17 unauthorized attempts to breach our secure transaction system. Each attempt corresponds with meetings between Bradley and Dataflow representatives. The access patterns suggest someone with inside knowledge was trying to map our network architecture. Sarah Peterson was furiously typing on her laptop. I'm trying to reach Robert, but he's not answering. His assistant says he's in meetings until 4:30. What kind of meetings? I asked, though I already suspected. Bradley answered before Sarah could. Meetings with potential acquisition partners. Morrison Tech has received several offers to purchase our technology assets. Your father is exploring options for selling the company. The pieces clicked together. You told Dad that selling was his idea, didn't you? You presented him with acquisition offers from companies that knew exactly what to bid for because you'd already provided them with our technology specifications. Business is complicated, Athena. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for the greater good of the organization. Tyler burst through the conference room door carrying a laptop bag and looking harried. Bradley, what's the emergency? The operations team is saying something about system authorization deadlines. Athena has locked us out of the pipeline system, Bradley explained quickly. I need you to access the core infrastructure and input the daily authorization codes. Tyler opened his laptop and began typing. After 30 seconds, he looked up with confusion. I can't connect to the main transaction servers. All my administrative accounts are showing access denied errors. Try the backup authentication protocols, Jessica suggested. Tyler replied, frustration growing in his voice. Nothing's working. It's like the system has gone into some kind of lockdown mode. I checked my phone again. 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The system enters final authorization countdown at 4 minutes. After that point, even if I wanted to stop the shutdown sequence, it would be too late. Bradley stood up and moved toward me. Give me your phone. I'll input the codes myself. Tom Williams stepped between us. Sir, you need to stay in your seat. Tom, I'm ordering you to restrain this woman and take her phone. She's sabotaging our business operations. Sir, I don't take orders regarding potential criminal investigations. If Miss Morrison's allegations are correct, you may be the one engaging in illegal activity. Tyler was typing frantically, sweat beading on his forehead. The system is asking for biometric authentication now. It wants a fingerprint scan linked to the primary administrator account. Whose fingerprint? Sarah Peterson asked. Mine, I said simply. I designed the system to prevent exactly this scenario. If someone tries to force access during a security lockdown, the biometric requirements become more stringent, not less. Bradley pulled out his own phone. I'm calling our lawyers. This is corporate sabotage, and I won't let you destroy this company to protect your job. Call them, I agreed. They'll be interested to learn that you've been violating the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, the Economic Espionage Act, and probably several banking regulations. Corporate espionage carries federal penalties of up to 15 years in prison. My phone buzzed with an alert, pipeline system entering final authorization countdown, T-minus 3 minutes to automatic shutdown. Tyler slammed his laptop shut. I can't override this. The security protocols are built into the hardware level. Without proper authorization, the system treats any access attempt as a hostile intrusion. There has to be a way, Jessica said desperately. Emergency procedures manual overrides something. There is, I replied. I input my authorization code, and everything continues normally, but that requires me to remain as the primary system administrator with full authority over technical security decisions. Bradley's phone rang. He answered immediately. David, thank God. We have a situation here. He listened for a moment, his face growing paler. What do you mean the transaction feeds are showing errors? I could guess what David Sterling from Dataflow was telling him. Our banking clients had automated monitoring systems that tracked transaction processing in real time. As we approached the authorization deadline, those systems were beginning to register anomalies in our data feeds. 2 minutes, I announced. Sarah Peterson was crying now, understanding that her job, along with 59 others, depended on what happened in the next 120 seconds. Athena, please, whatever Bradley did, don't punish the whole company for it. I'm not punishing anyone, I said gently. I'm protecting the company from people who are planning to destroy it for personal profit. Tyler tried one more desperate approach. What if we physically disconnect the servers, force a hardware restart? That would trigger permanent lockdown mode, I explained. The system would interpret a forced restart during the authorization window as evidence of physical tampering. Recovery would require FBI clearance and could take weeks. Bradley ended his phone call, his hands shaking. Dataflow is threatening to withdraw from our partnership if we can't guarantee system stability. Good, I replied. Partnership was never their intention anyway. 1 minute, Tom Williams announced, checking his own watch. The conference room fell silent, except for the sound of phones ringing throughout the building. I could hear urgent conversations in the hallway as our operations team tried to understand why they were receiving automated warnings about system authorization failures. Tyler made one final plea. Athena, I know we got off on the wrong foot, but 60 people are going to lose their jobs if the system goes down. Their families depend on Morrison Tech. Please don't let our mistakes hurt innocent people. I looked around the room. Sarah Peterson, who'd always treated me fairly during my 5 years with the company. Tom Williams, who'd worked his way up from part-time security guard through competence and dedication. Tyler and Jessica, who'd made terrible decisions but were probably just following Bradley's lead. And Bradley Whitman, who'd systematically betrayed my father's trust, stolen our technology, and planned to destroy the company that 60 families depended on for their livelihoods. 30 seconds, I said. I opened my phone and held my finger over the authorization screen. Here's my offer. Bradley resigns immediately and provides complete documentation of his communications with Dataflow and any other potential buyers. Tyler and Jessica surrender all company equipment for forensic analysis. Sarah schedules an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning to review the evidence of corporate espionage. And I'm reinstated as Chief Technology Officer with complete authority over all technical systems and security protocols. This is blackmail, Bradley whispered. This is justice, I replied. 10 seconds. Bradley looked around the room desperately, but found no allies. Tom Williams was recording everything on his phone. Sarah Peterson was nodding enthusiastically. Tyler and Jessica were staring at their laptops, understanding their careers at Morrison Tech were over regardless. Fine, Bradley said. I agree. 5 seconds. I need to hear you say it clearly, I insisted. I resign as Chief Operating Officer of Morrison Tech, Bradley said through clenched teeth. I'll provide documentation of my communications with external parties. 2 seconds. I pressed my finger to the phone's biometric scanner. 1 second. The scanner beeped softly, and my phone displayed daily authorization accepted, all systems operational. But I didn't input the code. I set my phone down on the conference table and watched the countdown reach 0. Throughout the building, phones exploded with sound as automated alerts flooded our operations center. The main display screen in the hallway flashed red. 12 major banks simultaneously received notifications that their primary transaction processing service had gone offline. What have you done? Bradley whispered. I've given you 10 minutes to think about whether you were telling the truth, I replied calmly. The system is now in emergency lockdown mode. Recovery requires not just my authorization, but also verification from our Chief Technology Officer. Since you just fired the only CTO we have, we'll need board approval to reinstate my position before I can restore operations. The silence in the conference room was broken only by the sound of chaos erupting throughout Morrison Tech as 60 employees tried to understand why their critically important, never-failing system had just shut down for the first time in 3 years. Bradley stared at me with something approaching respect mixed with absolute terror. You're serious? Completely. The next 30 minutes transformed Morrison Tech from a quiet technology company into the center of a financial emergency. Our main phone line received 47 calls in the first 10 minutes after shutdown. Bank executives, regulatory officials, client operations, managers, everyone who depended on our transaction processing system, demanding to know why their critical infrastructure had just gone dark. Margaret Williams, our chief financial officer, burst into the conference room 15 minutes after the shutdown. What happened to the pipeline First National is threatening to terminate our contract immediately. Pacific Trust says they're invoking penalty clauses. We're looking at millions in liability if this isn't resolved within the hour. Ask Bradley, I said simply. Margaret turned to Bradley, who was staring at his phone as messages flooded in from Dataflow. His father, and what I assumed were very angry lawyers. I need an explanation, and I need it now. Sarah Peterson handed Margaret a printed copy of the evidence I'd compiled. Bradley has been conducting unauthorized communications with Dataflow Corporation. There's evidence suggesting he was planning to transfer our proprietary technology to competitors. While Margaret reviewed the documents, her expression shifted from confusion to shock to outright fury. These emails suggest you were facilitating a hostile acquisition of our company. The communications were taken out of context, Bradley said weakly. The context is that you were selling our technology to competitors while planning to eliminate our technical staff, Tom Williams interjected. I've secured Tyler's and Jessica's computers. The file transfer logs show gigabytes of proprietary data sent to external addresses. 20 minutes after shutdown, Dad finally returned my calls. Athena, what's happening? I'm getting calls from board members, bank executives, regulatory officials. They're saying our entire transaction system is offline. It is, I confirmed. I can explain everything, but I need you to come to the office immediately, conference room B. Can you restore the system first? Every minute costs us thousands of dollars in penalties. Dad, the system went offline for a reason. Bradley has been selling our technology to Dataflow Corporation. I have evidence of corporate espionage, breach of fiduciary duty, and violations of federal financial regulations. The shutdown was the only way to prevent him from completing the theft. Silence on the phone. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. 30 minutes after shutdown, the first board member arrived. Patricia Vance, who'd served on Morrison Tech's board for 8 years and held a 10% ownership stake in the company. She took one look at the evidence spread across the conference table and immediately called our corporate attorney. "This is catastrophic," she told the lawyer over speakerphone. "If these allegations are substantiated, we're looking at criminal charges, civil liability, potential regulatory sanctions from the Banking Commission." Dad arrived 45 minutes after shutdown, his face pale with exhaustion and stress. He'd been in meetings with potential acquirers all afternoon, completely unaware that the acquisition discussions had been orchestrated by someone systematically betraying his company. "Show me everything," he said quietly. I walked him through Tyler's unauthorized access attempts, Bradley's communications with Dataflow, the proposed technology transfers, the planned employee terminations. Dad read every email, reviewed every log file, studied every piece of evidence I'd compiled. When he finished, he looked at Bradley with disappointment I'd never seen before. "Jonathan Whitman and I have been friends for 15 years. I trusted you with my life's work because I trusted your father. How could you do this?" Bradley's composure finally broke completely. The company was stagnating. The technology was outdated. Dataflow offered a path to modernization that would have benefited everyone. "Benefited everyone," Dad's voice rose. "You were planning to sell our client contracts, fire half our employees, and transfer our proprietary systems to our biggest competitor. How does that benefit anyone except you and Dataflow?" 1 hour after shutdown, the complete board of directors had assembled for an emergency meeting. Patricia Vance, Margaret Williams, Dad, and Jonathan Whitman, who'd arrived looking mortified as he learned what his son had been doing with the trust Morrison Tech had placed in him. "I'm withdrawing my investment immediately," Jonathan told the board. "I'll sell my shares back to Robert at cost. My son's actions are unconscionable, and I won't profit from his betrayal." The board vote was unanimous. Bradley was terminated for cause with no severance package and immediate surrender of all company property. Tyler and Jessica were fired pending potential criminal charges. All contracts with Dataflow were terminated, and our corporate attorney was instructed to pursue legal action for attempted industrial espionage. Most importantly for me, the board approved my promotion to Chief Technology Officer, with complete autonomy over all technical systems, infrastructure decisions, and security protocols. 2 hours after shutdown, I finally restored the pipeline system. My finger pressed against the biometric scanner this time, coupled with my new CTO authorization codes. The system hummed back to life, transaction feeds resumed, and 12 major banks breathed collective sighs of relief as their processing capabilities returned to normal. But the real resolution came 6 months later. Morrison Tech didn't just survive the crisis, we thrived. News of our successful defense against corporate espionage impressed our banking clients, who appreciated that we'd prioritized their data security over our own operational convenience. 3 additional banks signed processing contracts with us, specifically citing our demonstrated commitment to protecting financial data. I hired a team of 6 engineers, all women with strong technical backgrounds, who'd been overlooked by other companies in favor of candidates with better cultural fit. Maria Gonzalez, who'd been working tech support at a major bank, designed improvements to our fraud detection algorithms that increased processing accuracy by 12%. Sarah Chen, formerly a systems administrator at a nonprofit, implemented automation protocols that reduced our operational overhead by 30%. Dad recovered fully from his health scare and returned to active leadership, but with a renewed appreciation for the technical expertise that had built our company's success. He established a formal succession plan that recognized technical leadership as equally important as business development. The data flow investigation expanded into a federal case when prosecutors discovered Bradley had attempted similar schemes at two previous companies. His Harvard MBA and Goldman Sachs experience couldn't protect him from wire fraud charges and violations of the Economic Espionage Act. He's currently serving a 4-year federal sentence, while Dataflow faces regulatory sanctions that may force them out of business entirely. Tyler and Jessica avoided criminal charges by cooperating with investigators, but their careers in technology are effectively over. Tyler returned to his family's construction business in Ohio. Jessica took a job teaching business courses at a community college in Arizona. Most satisfying of all, Morrison Tech's reputation as a company that protects its clients and employees attracted attention from investors who valued integrity over quick profits. We received acquisition offers from 4 major firms, but Dad and I decided to remain independent. We're processing over $5 billion in transactions annually now, with offices in 7 states and a team of 85 employees. I learned something important during those 10 minutes when our pipeline was offline. Sometimes protecting what you've built requires taking enormous risks. Sometimes standing up for your values means being willing to lose everything in order to save what truly matters. But more than anything, I learned that the systems we build are only as strong as the principles we're willing to defend. Technology without integrity is just expensive equipment. Real security comes from people who understand that their responsibility extends beyond code and servers to the families and communities that depend on their work. 6 months later, whenever someone asks me about that day, when I shut down a $320,000 per hour pipeline to stop corporate raiders from stealing our company, I tell them the same thing. Some decisions are bigger than money. Some fights are worth having. And sometimes, the only way to save something is to risk losing it completely. The morning I was promoted to Chief Technology Officer, Dad pulled me aside in his office. "I should have trusted you from the beginning," he said. "I should have investigated your concerns immediately instead of asking you to prove the impossible." "You were trying to protect the company," I replied. "Sometimes that means being cautious with serious accusations." "No," he said firmly. "I was trying to avoid difficult conversations with investors. I was prioritizing business relationships over family loyalty. You risked everything to CEO this company, and I almost let my own fear prevent me from supporting you." Today, Morrison Tech processes $7 billion in transactions annually. We employ 93 people across 10 states. Our technology protects the financial security of millions of families who depend on fast, reliable banking services. But beyond the numbers, we've built something more valuable: a company culture that prioritizes integrity over profit, technical excellence over management trends, and employee loyalty over investor appeasement. We've proven that small companies can compete with industry giants when they're built on principles that don't change with the market conditions. Every morning when I review our pipeline status, watching millions of dollars in transactions flow through systems I designed and protected, I remember that October afternoon when everything hung in the balance. I remember the choice between self-preservation and principled action. I remember that sometimes the most important decision you'll ever make has to be made in 10 minutes or less. And I remember that when someone tries to steal your life's work, sometimes the best defense is shutting everything down and starting over on your own terms. Have you ever had to choose between keeping your job and doing what you knew was right? Sometimes the biggest risks lead to the most meaningful rewards, but it takes courage to bet everything on your principles when the stakes are highest. What would you have done in my situation? Would you risk destroying something to save it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about standing up for what's right, even when the cost seems too high. And please share this with anyone who's ever faced a choice between security and integrity. Because sometimes we all need to be reminded that doing the right thing, even when it's terrifying, is what separates us from the people who would steal our dreams for their own profit. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reminds you that your work, your principles, and your courage matter more than you might realize. Until next time, remember that the most important systems we build aren't made of code and servers, but of trust, integrity, and the willingness to fight for what we believe in.